Well, hey there, idiots. Welcome back to Observe, and in today's video, we're going to be analyzing nonverbal communication of Jim Carrey. I'm sure most of you have heard about what's going on around him. I'll give you a little overview of it right after the intro. Alright, for those of you who are not aware, I have a second channel that I'm going to be more active on this year than I have been in the prior years. Over at that channel, I do more things that are more creative and whatever I kind of feel like doing, rather than the very hyper-focused on nonverbal communication psychology that we have here on this channel. So if you would like to go and see some things like music,
and talking back, my daddy was a green-eyed mountain,
or short films, or vlogs, and sometimes some of the behind the scenes of the stuff that goes on here at Observe, things that I'm making or plans, things like that, go ahead and head over to that other channel, check it out, hit subscribe if you want to, thank you in advance. All right, now for a quick backstory, Jim Carrey has recently accepted an award at the Caesar Awards over in France, and people are all sorts of chit-chatty about how he looks, and there have been some pretty chaotic theories that are going around. A lot of people are troubled because it does not look like the Jim Carrey that people have known for so long. The most common and least far-fetched theory is that it's a body double. It's somebody who looks similar to Jim Carrey, who's filling in a role for him. It could be another actor, it could be a makeup artist, and there have been some rumors flying around with that, not the least of which is makeup artist Alexis Stone has come forward and said that he was the one who was portraying Jim Carrey at the time, and showed this picture of a mask and some dental prosthetics as well to be able to try to back that up with the Eiffel Tower in the background. My specific thing, just to go ahead and get ahead of that, I don't think that it was Alexis Stone. I know that the picture of the mask was shown and everything like that. However, if you look at the movement of Jim Carrey's face at the actual ceremony, then you can see that there is too much movement, flexibility, malleability to the skin of his face that would not be present during the wearing of a full silicone mask. If that was the case, that would be like a Mission Impossible level of silicone mask, and we don't have that yet. And so, no, to cut that part short, I don't believe that that's the case here. And then the more far-fetched theory that I've heard is that it's a human clone that has been somehow created and put into place here to clear some stuff up right away. Human cloning is globally unaccepted still. We can and have cloned embryos for stem cell research. We have cloned plenty of animals, but the human cloning factor is just unaccepted. It's not promoted for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the philosophical reasons behind it. And so all across the globe, it has been unanimously accepted that human cloning is not, we're not doing that, at least right now. Who knows what's gonna happen in the future, but right now we're not doing that. Also, the question of why? Why would they? Why would they do a clone for this? What would be the purpose of this? Some people are saying, oh, it's because Jim Carrey is a whistleblower for some of the elite shadiness that goes around in some of these other circles and things like that. And there's the possibility, but the expenses that would go into creating a clone that would be able to flawlessly pull off a representation of an already existent human is astronomical. And the payoff, especially as Jim Carrey is at the end of his career, he's wanting to retire. There's not a large reason for that to even be there, even fiscally, financially for people. So what we're going to be doing in today's video is we're going to be going through the annals of time to analyze nonverbal communication presented by Jim Carrey as he accepts various awards or as he is presenting various awards, and that's because these instances are similar. So we can rely on the nonverbal patterns that we see across time to develop a little bit more of an understanding as to how Jim Carrey behaves non-verbally. It gives us a scope of time to be able to see if there is any broader pattern non-verbally, and it also gives us enough instances throughout time being similar instances that it allows us to develop baselines and some of the idiosyncrasies that belong more specifically to Jim Carrey. Now, something else to call light to before diving into this is that a good impersonator might be able to pull off a number of the non-verbal ticks and tells that Carrey has done throughout the years, but it will also be to an overt degree. Anytime that there is an impersonator, the tics, the tells, the idiosyncrasies, the smaller nonverbal movements that a person does are oftentimes lightly amplified by the impersonator because that's what's picked up on. And so, if we were to be relying on that, then there are some certain patterns that you might expect to see if this was an impersonator. Regardless, I have talked so much at the beginning of this without actually looking at any footage, so now we're going to start right in. This first clip is going to be from 1997. It's one of the earlier times of Jim Carrey accepting an award, and this is the MTV Movie Awards. Let's watch. We'll talk about some of the nonverbal stuff that we see and the verbal stuff after each clip as time progresses.
Oh, thank you. Will, one word, 2 syllables, breath assured. Okay? I had a lot of time to think of that. It's not fair. First of all, I would like to thank Will and the rest of the nominees in this category. They are unbelievable talents and want what I've got so bad they can taste it. Oh, wow, I'm sorry. Where'd that come from? I'd like to thank my management team, who are wonderful, the best at what they do in every category, and should thank their lucky stars they ever met me!
Some things to be able to start pointing out immediately. Verbally speaking, not necessarily what he's saying, but the tonality and some of the utterances that he has. At the beginning of many of his acceptance speeches or any areas where he's going to be mentioning something emotional or that has weight behind it, you will hear him have a vocal utterance beforehand. It's usually like an ah or an or an oh or something along those lines, and then he'll go into his actual statement. That's something that I want to call light to here because it's a pattern he has throughout the time. So that would be something to keep in mind in this new hot topic of him accepting the award in France. And so we have that utterance, and then he goes into things. Now, non-verbally speaking, there are a number of things that he is prone to. He has a certain posturing, which I find interesting, and seems to be fairly intentional that he'll take when doing comedic or stand-up or speeches, things like that. And that's where he'll almost jut his chin forward a little bit. And his bone structure really lends towards this amplified, almost contortion of his posture like that, but it comes in there regularly. Another thing that I'll notice is that he likes to move his shoulders around a bit while talking, and this can vary. Sometimes he'll have his hands on the podium or wherever, but we'll see a fair bit of an animation around in his torso to shoulder area like that as well. And then another thing that he ends up doing regularly, which is something that he is more known for, is the very overtly animated facial expressions. Now, this is very early on, so some things that we will anticipate as human nature tends to progress is that early on, it's the youthful high spirits, as it's said earlier on in younger years, people tend to be more animated, especially if they're confident in an area or trying to portray as such. More animation, broad movements, higher energy, louder tone, that will be characteristic of a younger person. So as a person ages, it's anticipatable that those specific characteristics mellow. So as Carrey gets older, it is expected in human nature and human psychology that the youthful brashness and high spirits will soften, and he'll become more subdued, he won't talk as forcefully, and his movements will become less dynamic in general. He's aging. We're now going to move on to the next segment of this, which is just a couple years later, and we'll talk about the nonverbals that we see in this, and you know the pattern. You can kind of see where we're going with this.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here tonight to present the Academy Award for Outstanding Achievement in Film Editing. That's all I'm here to do. I have nothing else to worry about. I could just show up and enjoy the parties. I would have thought that voting for myself was going to make the difference, but you really got to get out there and talk to people. Anyway, who cares? I have been beaten by Roberto Benigni. He has jumped into my ocean. A good film editor is vital to the art of filmmaking. They are unsung heroes in our business, rearranging and matching the images we see on screen, agonizing over the infinite possibilities. Without their talents and tenacity, the story could never be told.
All right, there's a number of things, obviously, that stick out in this one. When he first starts off into this one, he does a thing that's very characteristic, and he does repeatedly throughout multiple settings. This can be interviews, this can be award ceremonies, this can be like getting caught on the street with somebody with a cell phone. He has a specific facial manipulation expression that comes out here, and he does a semi-lip lick and this tight lip gesture expression that goes along with it. Very intentional, and he does it repeatedly. So that one's kind of more of an idiosyncratic movement to him. Some other people will do similar sorts of moves at times, but for him, it's a pattern that he has shown repeatedly. Then immediately what we're seeing right after that again is the shoulder movements. Like I said, he likes to move his torso around a fair bit. These are only a few years apart here, so there's not a lot of change that's going to happen non-verbally between who we just saw before and the one that we just saw now. And so we're going to look for those similarities with that. Another thing that you could see is while he's holding the paperwork, the card, whatever it is, it's probably the announcement card, whoever's name. While he's holding that, you can see him fidgeting with his hand in a very repetitive motion. It's usually a sign of agitation, nervousness in this case, is feeling probably a little nervous, as many people do, regardless of their fame levels when they're up in front of a massive group of people, especially when it's a massive group of people of your peers and other coworkers and like possible other business deals and stuff like that. There's a lot of nervousness, there's a lot of pressure behind that, so you'll see that coming out. So the item being held in front with that manipulator is something, though, that he does regularly as well. So if we don't see those sorts of behaviors in the future ones, that could be one of those areas where it's like, well, here's an incongruency. We've seen this pattern of behavior before in the past from him. It's non-existent here, so just something to make note of. And then we're hearing a specific tone. As he's younger here, you hear a lot more force behind his words. He's projecting much more strongly, and there's strain to that as well, as the energy is kind of carrying that forward. Again, this fits with one, being up on stage. He's public speaking, so projection makes sense there. But then also with the youthful high spirit side of things. When you're younger, you can tend to be a little bit louder. As you get older, you can tend to get a little bit softer and quieter. That's not always the case. There are some people that get obnoxiously loud as they get old. And there are some people that are very quiet when they're young, but as a general social rule of thumb, the older you get, the quieter and softer you become. And so we're seeing youthful energy from his nonverbal communication. We're also hearing the youthful energy in his words and tone, and it's all giving us a little bit more clear of a picture as to how Jim Carrey has behaved in these acceptance speeches. We'll want to listen to that specific timbre and tone in his voice, not the strain, and not the pitch. Pitch and strain do not have anything to do with the qualities of the voice itself. We'll have to listen to that as time goes on.
Thank you. I am two-time Golden Globe winner Jim Carrey. You know, when I go to sleep at night, I'm not just a guy going to sleep. I'm two-time Golden Globe winner Jim Carrey going to get some well-needed shut-eye. And when I dream, I don't just dream any old dream. No, sir. I dream about being three-time Golden Globe winning actor Jim Carrey. Because then I would be enough. It would finally be true. And I could stop this terrible search. But these are important, these awards. I don't want you to think that just because if you blew up our solar system alone, you wouldn't be able to find us or any of human history with the naked eye. But from our perspective, this is huge.
This is almost 2 decades later from the one that we just watched. Carrey is much older at this point, and shockingly to probably, I would hope, no one, the expected curve of high energy to lower subdued energy as age progresses is present. He's now an older gentleman than he was in the prior ones, and he is shockingly non-verbally more subdued. He still has the characteristic moves that we've talked about in his shoulders. He still likes to move around a little bit. He's not one of those types of speakers and presenters that just sits there really, really stationary and still the whole time and never moves even a little bit. That's not how he presents. He's always been more animated. However, now he's older, and that animation is becoming more subdued. Speaking facially, we start to see a lot less animation. He's not doing the theatrics in his facial expressions either. That being said, you could still see as the speech progresses forward some of his youthful animation and what kind of characterizes his behavior in front of the cameras. It starts to creep in a little bit as he gets some broader gestures and they're more vibrant and energetic. We're starting to see a little bit of the earlier days of Jim Carrey, while again, he's still just more subdued. He's getting older, and we're seeing the same fidgeting in front of him. This is a common pattern that I have seen throughout the years of Jim Carrey having. We're now going to fast forward a little bit further, just a couple more years, and we'll see him in a state that I feel is between this bearded state and the state of what people saw him in France. Let's watch.
Wow. Thank you so much. That was very convincing. I approve of this entire illusory manifestation. I'm glad it didn't come in the mail. Kind of worked. It kind of worked. Maybe a little soon. It is my job to try, Kate. Sorry. Yes, I no longer have packages delivered to my home in the great America that's been fashioned in the last couple of years. I don't remember it ever being this great, actually. I want to express my sincere gratitude to BAFTA for this immense honor.
Carrey has shaved his beard, and immediately that added more youth to him. He looks younger than he did in the prior one, which I think that is a thing for us to notice, is that at this stage here, he's turning back towards looking more youthful. He's shaving his beard, he's trying to have a younger haircut, but when we're speaking non-verbally, we're seeing a lot of the same stuff. The verbal side of things, we heard the vocal utterance, and then he goes into his acceptance or his speech. Vocal utterance, speech, pattern we've seen in the past on repeat before. We're also seeing the same manipulators on the trophy held in front of him. We're seeing the shoulders move around a little bit, and we're seeing facial animation still present. Now, that being said, it's more subdued yet again. If you compare what he's doing in this one to what he did in his earlier ones, you could see that dynamic difference. It's very noticeable. Very dynamically moving over here, more subdued over here, more refined. Now you could still hear in his tone, he has the same tone, he has the same pitch, and a little bit of that same stressor and force. And so now we're about to start getting to some more of the hot topic stuff here. Let's look.
Bonsoir. Merci beaucoup. C'est très gentil. En tant qu'acteur, chaque personnage que vous incarnez, c'est comme l'argile du sculpteur que vous façonnez à la forme de votre cœur. Mon arrière grand-père, Marc-François Carré, oui, Carré, quittait Saint-Malo en France pour le Canada. Plus tard, j'ai continué jusqu'à Los Angeles et ce soir, avec ce magnifique honneur, ce Carré a bouclé la boucle. Comment était mon français? presque médiocre, non? Pardonnez-moi, je ne parle pas que le mot français, mais je l'emprunte juste. Ma langue est fatiguée. Je vous aime tous, du fond du cœur. Merci.
That's where people are taking issue. It doesn't look like the Jim Carrey of even a few years ago, which even the footage that I have shown of the prior speech was almost 10 years ago. That's 8 years ago that prior speech was shown. And that's where I take a lot of issue with people that are showing pictures comparing Jim Carrey, is they're showing Jim Carrey from many years ago to now and being like, it's not the same person. So we're not going to talk about the face quite yet as to the changes and alterations that have gone on there. We're going to talk about his body language and how he handled the rest of that and some of the movements before we get to the actual structure of the face, which is where a lot of people are having issues. When we're speaking nonverbal, at the beginning of his little speech, you hear an utterance, and then he starts into his speech. He's 60-something, early 60s now. I think he's 64, 62, 64, somewhere in there. With that, we're expecting to see a few things. One, we've seen that he's showing a pattern of becoming more subdued non-verbally. We also saw in the last one that he took a little turn away from growing out the beard and kind of embracing this elderly time in his life to maybe wanting to turn a little bit more youthful again. Then we come to this one, and it seems as though that trajectory has continued. While his nonverbal communication has stayed, the way that he wants his face to look seems to be turning even more towards youthful, which is not unheard of at all. Many people who are elderly crave how they used to look in their youth, and they try to do the same things. Non-verbally speaking, you could see him still moving his shoulders around. He does the same posturing with the chin jut forward, which creates a specific silhouette that he has there. He interacts with the crowds in the same way. He mentions some things to Kate and does some little interactions with the announcers, and that's a pattern that he's had as well. He does a level of almost crowd work with his speeches. Now, something that people have been taking issue with is the sound of his voice. No, he doesn't sound the same. It's not Jim Carrey's voice. The tonality, the consistency and quality of his tone is the same. The difference is that he's speaking in French here. So one, that changes how you approach speaking in general. If you're not a native speaker of a certain language and you try to do so, you try to speak in that language, especially in this sort of area, you're gonna hear some unnatural qualities to that. So for him, it's a lot softer. He's speaking more towards the front of his mouth rather than back in the projected area that he had before. However, the voice that's producing it sounds the same. If he had shifted back over to his normal public speaking, I'm presenting to these people as if in my younger years, you would be able to hear that same harshness, that same edge, that same strain, and that same pitch increase, while the voice itself stays the same. So in my opinion, this still sounds like Jim Carrey attempting to speak in a language that he is not native to speaking. Now, despite his overall lower energy, he does have moments of his youthful theatrics creep through, and you can see them clearly as he plays them out. But again, this is being done by an older man now, not by a 20 to 30-year-old. So it plays out differently in and of itself. Now we're gonna go ahead and move on to some other shots that aren't specifically just of accepting speeches like this. And we'll talk about some of the nonverbals that we can see in that. And this is where we'll talk about some of the physical, structural shifts to his appearance. So let's go ahead and just start watching these.
Bonjour. Bonjour. Oh, it's a wonderful feeling. I really took on a pretty big challenge trying to do my speech in French. So, I wrote it and I researched it and I practiced it like crazy. But, it's... then I watched everybody talking 1,000 miles an hour up there receiving their awards, and I was like, I'm dead. And I made mistakes, and I was like a novice, but I felt a lot of love, and I felt a lot of appreciation that I tried, and what I said was true, and I really wanted to recognize my family. I wanted to recognize my dad. I mean, my dad was the type of person that if you met him for 5 minutes, you felt like you knew him for 50 years. I can't talk about him without getting emotional. Oh, loved it. It's so beautiful. And having Michelle, you know, Camille Coton, that was also amazing. And it was just a brilliant evening, you know? Really brilliant evening. Oh my gosh. Benjamin Laverne was off the hook. I mean, I can't believe he committed to doing all that. I was really, is this about someone else? My favorite funny face is the one I'm wearing right now.
Thank you so much, Jim.
That's the clip that has the internet all in a tizzy. It's not even so much his acceptance speech. It's that clip where you can kind of see a little bit more detail, and he's speaking in English. Let's start there. He's speaking in English and his tone is so much softer. The qualities of his voice still sound the same to me, but it does sound like somebody who's speaking softer. So for instance, I'm speaking to you like this right now, and I'm speaking in what would be considered the same sort of area of the throat and mouth back here, where you can project and it has a certain edge to my voice. However, if I want to, I can now start speaking more softly. Now the sounds are coming closer to the front of my mouth, and it just doesn't have the same tonal qualities as it does when I speak back here. Harsher back here, softer up here. And so if he had already delivered said speech in French, and now he's following up right after that, it would almost feel weirder for him to speak in that way up there and then come down to speak to everybody else and be speaking in his very harsh spoken word. That being said, it is different. The way that he linguistically presents in that specific interaction there, it does feel different. So I had to go back and forth a little bit on this, and I ended up stumbling upon multiple clips of Carrey referencing that even the Jim Carrey that you and I and the rest of the public know is fake. It's a persona that he puts on.
I don't exist. So they're all characters that I've played, including Jim Carrey, including Joel Barish, including any of those things. They're all characters. Jim Carrey was a less intentional character,
Right.
because I thought I was just building something that people would like, but it was a character.
And it's been a battle even for him of being able to separate out himself from these personas that he has had to do, be it for acting, but also just be it for the character, the person of Jim Carrey. With that in mind, that would kind of allow some leniency and grace in this to where, yes, his tone sounds a little different and where he's speaking in his mouth is different. But if what we've seen in the past has been an act to begin with, who's to say, except for Jim Carrey himself, that this isn't more of his authentic tone? Maybe he is more soft-spoken this way, and that would also fit with the natural curve of he is older now than he was when it was 1990s and early 2000s. Some other things, his eye color. Whew, that has the internet in a tizzy, which I understand. His eye color in this interaction seems to be much lighter. It's almost like a green sort of color, a pale green sort of color. And everybody's like, Jim Carrey has dark brown eyes, which is not the case. Jim Carrey has hazel eyes. Go and look at the photos. You can see the complexity in the color. It is not an even amber brown. He has hazel eyes. For people that have hazel eyes, if you're watching this, you know you have a tendency, I also have hazel eyes, you have a tendency to have your eye color change moments to moments, days to days. Emotions can affect it, sunlight can affect it, all sorts of things can affect your eye color. Hazel eyes rarely stay stagnant the exact same color across different settings. There's that to consider. Along with that, as you get older, your eye color can change. It can darken, but oftentimes it lightens as melanin is not as concentrated in the area. So if we're dealing with somebody with hazel eyes who will have color variance to begin with, and they're now older, the possibility of there just being a lighter color eye day greatly increases. So just the eye color being different, unfortunately, is still not good enough either. Outside of the color of the eyes, we're gonna start talking about the shape of the face. A lot of people are like, that's not how his eyes look. They have different qualities to them. However, if you take some time and go and watch some plastic surgeons talk about this. I spent several hours watching as many different voices in the plastic surgery realm talking about this as I could, and the unanimous consensus is that this is Jim Carrey with work done. and a number of different works done.
His brows look elevated, possibly due to an endoscopic brow lift. You can see his hairline has even raised a little bit, and this is another sign of a brow lift. His eyelids are a lot more open, and he doesn't appear to have excess skin of his eyes that he had before. This is consistent with an upper blepharoplasty, but one that was done very aggressively, causing him to look really different. His cheeks also look lifted, the possible result of a mid-face or cheek lift. He also has more volume in his cheeks, which can be due to injections of his own fat. Well, also his nose looks longer, and this could be the result of a rhinoplasty. His jawline and his neckline also look sharper. This could be the possible result of a lower facelift. And finally, his forehead is also really smooth, much smoother than it used to be, which could be due to Botox.
The eyes that the person that people are claiming isn't Jim Carrey, the eyes of that person look to have received that procedure as well, to almost a heavy-handed degree, and it gives this almost puffy look to the eyes, not just in this person, but across many people who have it and every person who has it to a heavy degree. Long story short, many plastic surgeons have gone through and shown in a very repeatable way. And I'm assuming that they all didn't sit down in a conference room and say, all right, this is what we're gonna say about Jim Carrey today. And if this many people are saying the same exact thing, then it's something that should at least be paid attention to, especially because they would probably know. The plastic surgery realm is probably one of the realms of expertise that really understands the folds of the skin of the face and how it rests and how it moves and what it looks like when it has been moved and things like that. Now we have some other footage to be able to go through here, and then we'll wrap up at the end.
Tonight, we make sure that Chris Cornell, Kim Thile, Hiro Yamamoto, Matt Cameron, and Ben Shepherd go down in history as one of the most majestic, powerful, and influential bands ever to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Long live Chris Cornell, and long live Soundgarden.
All right, so that was just last year. That's very recently. And you can already start to see some of the indicators of what we talked about for this France acceptance speech thing. One, his hair looks the same. You could tell that he's growing his hair out at this point, and it has the same qualities and consistency. 2025 Carrey looks pretty similar in the hair region to 2026 Carrey. We can hear the tone. It's still his voice. I don't think that anybody was really questioning, oh, is this Jim Carrey at this point? I don't think that that was the question, but this serves as a great bridge between the 2018 footage that we saw and the 2026 footage that we just saw. And so with that, we're seeing more of the animation with Jim. He has the same sorts of broad movements and whatnot, but this is also a higher energy setting. This is a rock and roll Hall of Fame sort of situation. So a higher energy is almost demanded, and you can hear it in the projection of his voice. He's talking back in the back of his throat again. The biggest spike that I did notice in this nonverbal communication journey that I went through with Jim Carrey is that at this Caesar Award acceptance speech, he did talk a lot more softly. That is inarguable. Can't really get around that. I still feel like the voice behind the tones, the timbres, the pitches, the strain, things like that, I still feel like the driving voice sounds the same, albeit with different qualities. But it is undeniable that he talked in a much softer register in this specific instance that we're dealing with, which can play also into many other aspects of Jim Carrey's existence that you and I as the public are not privy to. Mental health can play into that. Maybe he had some form of illness around that and didn't want to be exerting his voice. Maybe he just felt like speaking more softly, especially since he himself has said that all of these things that he has presented to cameras in the past is fake. The play act. Maybe this is just something that it's the more genuine him coming through, or it's another aspect of himself that he wants to present in yet another era of his life. We're going to continue watching through this, and then we're going to talk about some of the issues that I am taking with the internet saying some pretty distasteful things.
You've said in a past interview that you will come back if you get a script written in gold ink by angels.
Yeah.
Is this the script?
That might have been hyperbole, but yeah. You know, I came back to this universe because, first of all, I get to play a genius, which is a bit of a stretch. You know, it's just I bought a lot of stuff and I need the money, frankly. Yeah.
That's where we're going to wrap up with that because it amplifies something else that just helps add more context. You can hear in this specific clip, though, the tone that he's speaking in is more of the tone that everybody's expecting. But if you pay attention to the environment that he's in, it's loud. You can't help but hear the people in the background. And that's with decent microphones pointed directly at people. So its ambient noise is loud enough to overwhelm that directional microphone system. And so he has to project again. And as you project, as you speak louder and more forcefully, it changes the tone of things. Your voice is still going to be your voice, but it's not going to sound the same as if you were talking really softly. And so we can hear those sorts of tonality changes. And it's still, yet again, explained by environment, age, and personal decision. Now, we're going to get around to the part where I have issues. People have been saying some pretty nasty shit about the person that they're saying is not Jim Carrey. And for just a second, my encouragement for those of you that are like, that's not Jim Carrey, pause for a second before you say something rude, say something mean about him. Pause for a second and think for a second, what if you are wrong and that is Jim Carrey? What if you're actually sitting there and you're insulting the ever-living shit out of a person that you claim that you know and appreciate? So get your shit together first and foremost, because even if this is just a person impersonating, which I'm about 98% positive, this is not an impersonation. Even if it were an impersonator, do you want to be a dick to them? Like, why? What's your point? Don't just insult somebody's appearance because it's not what you anticipated somebody should look like. If you're doing that, you're a dick. And even if you're not intentionally being a dick, consider what you're doing. If this is Jim and all of these people are saying, oh, he looks awful now, that's not gonna be real great to Jim's mental health, now is it? And so many of the people doing this and saying this are people who claim to be fans of Jim. And if you're claiming to be a fan of Jim and he's just decided to go on this new physical journey, what's your problem? So that's my analysis of this. Throughout the years, being able to see and establish the patterns, we saw the same patterns that we have seen on repeat throughout the decades prior presented by Jim. There are differences, undeniable differences in both appearance and sound that he presents. However, those differences are able to be explained by very probable explanations. Plastic surgery, environment, age, personal choice, all of these factors will influence a presentation of a person. So yeah, I think to hopefully put a little bit of a needle in the balloon of this strange twist of things and to hopefully calm down people's nastiness towards what very well could just be Jim Carrey with some plastic surgery. I think it's Jim Carrey. I think that he's getting older, and I think that he had some work done to make him feel like it's not hitting him so heavily. That's what I feel. Maybe there's some other things around that. Maybe there's some health things that encourage him to need to get some plastic surgery. Maybe there's a new role coming up. Maybe it's just a different direction in his life. What have you. Regardless, age and plastic surgery, they answer all of the issues far, far, far better than some extreme over-the-top hoax, not the least of which is the universally, globally unaccepted and discouraged human cloning. Wow. But without further ado, that's all that I've got for today. My name is Logan, and you have been oh so awesome as you always are, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.